My name is Folu Olatona. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Community Health, College of Medicine, University of Lagos. This evening, I'll be taking you the lecture on nutrients as risk factors for non-communicable diseases. This topic suggests that the nutrients that are obtained from food, as good as they are, as useful as they are, they can cause diseases. And the particular type of disease that we're looking at now is non-communicable diseases. I'm sure in the course of this study, you have realized that there are different types of diseases. The first one that everybody is familiar with is communicable diseases. Those are the ones that are called infectious diseases. But this evening, we want to focus on non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases are the ones that are referred to as non-infectious. They are not transmissible from one person to the other. At the end of this session, you should be able to identify different nutrients and their functions. You remember we learned nutrients in secondary school, or if your first degree is related to medical or paramedical course. You should understand the effects of each nutrient on the body. You should identify nutrients that are risk factors for diseases. How are the nutrients, how do they constitute risk factors for non-communicable diseases? Then you should understand the mechanism of action of the risk factors. So make sure that at the end of today's lecture, you have grasped these four things. So what is a non-communicable disease? It's a medical condition that is non-infectious or non-transmissible. It cannot be transmitted from one person to another. It progresses slowly and lasts for long periods of time. So somebody may have non-communicable diseases incubating in his body, and it may not even show up until 30 years later. They don't progress fast, they progress slowly, and unfortunately last for long periods of time. So someone who has hypertension is likely to continue with that high blood pressure for life. If it's not well managed, it just continues like that. Even when management is taking place, medical personnel are assisting to give drugs, to give lifestyle management and all other kinds. Some people's blood pressure never gets corrected. So it lasts for long periods of time. And these diseases don't result from just one risk factor. They usually result from a combination of genetic, physiological, environmental, and behavioral factors. For example, if someone has diabetes, it may actually be genetic. And at the same time, there are contributions from the environment. There are some environments that are obesogenic. Just by virtue of living in that environment, you have access to refined foods, access to little or no fruits and vegetables, and at the same time, highly sedentary. So that environment does not favor a healthy life. It favors non-communicable diseases such as diabetes. And there are also some behavioral factors like the kind of foods people consume, how much they do or don't do exercise, how many hours of sitting in a day, smoking, consumption of alcohol. Those are the behavioral factors that are related to non-communicable diseases. Of course, we know that physiological factors like pregnancy, menstrual period, and menopause can affect obesity, and which in turn can affect these diseases that we have mentioned. So what are the examples? I've mentioned some. It's good to know others like coronary heart disease, chronic lung disease like asthma, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and cancer. Major behavioral risk factors for non-communicable diseases are tobacco use, physical inactivity, unhealthy diet, harmful use of alcohol. Nutrients. We want to talk about nutrients now because that's the culprit in this regard. Before I talk about nutrients, I'd like to remind you of diet. What is a diet? The word diet refers to the combination of foods that are taken habitually. So the way someone eats habitually, the kind of foods someone eats regularly, habitually, would determine that person's diet. But the substance in each food that is needed for the function and structure of life, that is called nutrient. An essential nutrient is that nutrient that the body cannot synthesize on its own, or maybe the body can synthesize it but not in an adequate amount. So it becomes essential. It must be provided by diet. So talking about nutrients, there are 6 major nutrients, which are carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, and water. That means that we need to look at each of these nutrients to determine their effect on non-communicable diseases. I would also like you to note the food groups because you don't go to the market to buy nutrients. What people buy, what they consume is food. Therefore, it's very important to know the food groups, and then you can identify the nutrients that are majorly available in each of these food groups. For the purpose of this lecture, I like to combine fruits and vegetables, grains, roots and tubers, legumes, meat. Meat group consists of not just beef, but chicken, turkey, fish, shrimps, and other animal products, egg, milk, and water. The functions of nutrients and their effects on NCDs. So we want to look at the function of each nutrient and what is the effect of the nutrient on non-communicable diseases. Carbohydrates. These are the main source of energy. Carbohydrates is a major source of energy for the body. Without carbohydrates, the body will not function properly. As a matter of fact, it's recommended that 50% of foods taken should be carbohydrates, because sometimes one may get carried away by people that are trying to lose weight, and it looks as if carbohydrates is a devil. No, everyone needs carbohydrates, and the sources include fruits, sugars, grains, starchy vegetables, and legumes. At least 50% of grains that are consumed in a day should be whole grains. They supply carbohydrates, but if they are not taken in the natural form, which is whole grains, the amount of fiber that will be gained by such a meal, by consuming such a meal, will not be good enough. So it's very important that grains are taken in form of whole grains, at least 50%. And what I usually tell people is that if you want to achieve this, then you should plan to consume whole grains in your house because what is available in the workplace and in events, office meetings is usually the refined grains. And if you live in Nigeria, most of the time is rice, processed rice. So it makes sense that in our homes we should eat whole grains, which can be corn on the cob, can even be the local brown rice, can be whole grain, whole wheat, whole oats, old fashioned oats, and other forms of whole grains. Refined grains have been identified as risk factors for non-communicable diseases. Why are we interested in whole grains? First, it contains a lot of fiber. Then it also contains some vitamins that are not available in the refined grains. Fruits and vegetables are also high in fiber, and this reduces the risk of coronary heart disease. Whole grains maintain normal blood glucose level because the fiber would not allow the sugar content to be released into the body suddenly. It's going to have a kind of delay effect. So what is the effect of carbohydrates on non-communicable diseases? Since carbohydrates supply energy, excess carbohydrates would cause obesity, which is a strong factor for non-communicable disease. As a matter of fact, obesity itself is now regarded as a disease and is a non-communicable disease. Moreover, it's a risk factor for all the diseases that I mentioned earlier on. The recommended dietary allowance of for calories now, recommended daily allowance for calorie is 1,900 to 2,200 kilocalories a day for women, but men need higher amounts, which can be as high as 2,900. It's not a good practice to reduce carbohydrates to too little. Even if one is managing weight, it's very important to consume moderate amounts of carbohydrate because too little can lead to liver disease. So you can see from this slide that carbohydrates at extremes can cause different diseases. Protein. Protein is a major structural component of cells. It's responsible for building and repair of body tissues. Protein is broken down into amino acids, the building blocks of protein. 9 out of the 20 amino acids are essential, must be provided in the diet. 10 to 35% of daily calories should come from lean protein sources. Lean protein sources mean sources of protein that are not accompanied by too much fat. So that translates to eating more of fish or skinless chicken compared to beef, lard, and other animal foods that are high in fat. Low-fat dairy is also a form of lean protein. Beans, eggs. One thing you should note about beans is that whenever you combine beans with whole grains, well, with grains generally, but we're encouraging whole grains more than refined grains. Whenever you consume this combination, the combination produces good quality protein that is very important for health. So it's a good source of protein. It's a good marriage that gives birth to good quality protein. There is an amino acid in beans that is not available in grains and vice versa. So it is a kind of good combination. Com- they complement each other. The effect of non-communicable diseases. What is the effect of protein on non-communicable diseases? First, too little protein can lead to undernutrition in children, and undernutrition is a risk factor for non-communicable diseases in adulthood. On the other hand, too much protein leads to childhood obesity, which is a risk factor for non-communicable diseases. Did you know that 80% of children who are obese would remain as obese adults? So it's very important that we don't allow our children to become obese. People would look at children, allow them to eat anything, drink anything, and say, oh, they are children, they will lose the weight, they will run around, but they may never. So it's very important that from age 2, we're conscious of what the children consume and don't give too much protein. In adults, too much protein is also very dangerous because it can lead to kidney damage. Remember that the kidney is the organ that is responsible for removing waste, especially nitrogenous waste from the body. So if the kidney is loaded with too much protein, then removing the nitrogenous waste will be a challenge and the kidney will be damaged. Too little protein can also cause disnutrition in adulthood. There's scenario wherein the adult is not getting enough protein to build muscle tissue, and at the same time is consuming too much carbohydrates that is being deposited as fats, especially in the abdominal region. So you see the person, especially a man now, having abdominal obesity, and at the same time is lean in the upper part of the body. So it's important that elderly people should consume enough protein without too much fat and too much carbohydrates. So that's very, very important. That's why they need to consume a lot of vegetables and legumes. From vegetables and legumes, they get a lot of amino acids that will be useful for protein formation without fats. The daily amount needed or recommended is 0.8 grams per kg. So just multiply somebody's weight in kilograms by 0.8. That is the amount of protein that is needed in a day. And that's not more than a pack of cards. The amount of protein needed in a layman's language is just like the size of a pack of cards of um, a kind of food that is rich in protein. So when you look at the amount of protein-rich foods that are now being sold in restaurants, you agree with me that they're rather too much compared to what is recommended. So in an average restaurant where you buy a pack of food, the chicken is even much bigger than the rice in that pack. And that's without measuring. That already suggests that the amount of protein is too much. Remember that I said 50% of food will be from carbohydrates. Energy that is obtained in a day will be from carbohydrates. So if you now get a very big piece of chicken, you'll be consuming too much fat and too much protein. So we move on to fat and oil. In this group, the group is called fat and oil, but the nutrient is called fats. Fat is an energy source, a source of energy. And if it's not taken in moderation, It can actually release a lot of calories into the body and lead to deposition of fat, obesity, and other associated diseases. The intake of fat increases the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, and this makes them very important. You still remember your fat-soluble vitamins? Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K. 20 to 35% of daily intake of energy should come from fat. So fat is important, but we must ensure that we're consuming safe fat, the healthy fat. Plant-based oil are generally safer than animal-based fat. So this group of food is called oil when it is from plant origin, and it's called fat if it's from animal origin. So the oil from nuts, seeds, and other plant-based foods are safe and are recommended. They are better than the fat from animal foods. But there is an exception. This is fish oil. Fish oil is peculiar. It's called oil, even though it's from animal origin, because it's healthy. It's actually recommended. Everyone should eat fish at least 3 times a week, according to the World Health Organization. Fish is rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which are very important for health. Everyone should limit intake of saturated fats, such as high-fat meat and full-fat dairy. So if you like to take full cream dairy, this is a good information for you. To avoid or limit their low-fat milk, low-fat dairy that you can take, and there are lean meats that you can take to avoid saturated fat. Total fat intake should be limited to 30% of energy per day or less to avoid obesity. Trans fat must be less than 1%. Trans fat is a kind of fat that is a product of polyunsaturated fat that has been exposed to very high temperature. So polyunsaturated fats are available in plant oil. So when plant oil is exposed to very high temperature, remember I said that the oil from plants is safer, but when it is exposed to very high temperature, then the nature changes, and in the process it changes to a bad substance and it releases trans fats, which is like a byproduct, very bad fat. Unfortunately, this trans fat is interesting, palatable, because the hydrogenated fat is nice, and that's why it's being produced. So it's used in many products like cake, other baked goods, then biscuits, margarine. That's why we must be careful. We must avoid processed foods. So trans fat is very high in those foods that I mentioned, and this indicates that we must limit such foods or avoid them completely. So for example, if you need a spread, instead of taking margarine, it's better to take a little butter and run away from margarine completely. Yeah, butter is full of saturated fat because it's from animal origin. Margarine is from plant oil, but it's full of trans fat because it's been hydrogenated. So it's better to take a little butter. High density lipoprotein is one of the kind of fat that is safe and it protects the heart. But low density lipoprotein is bad and it increases the risk of cardiovascular events. Did you know that trans fat increases low density lipoprotein and reduces high density lipoprotein. Just imagine, this trans fat will reduce the good one and increase the bad one. So run away from any foods that is high in trans fat. Check the label, check the nutrition label on processed foods. And if trans fat is there, avoid. So what is the effect of fat on non-communicable diseases? Everybody knows that too much fat is no good. It will lead to obesity, hypercholesterolemia, cancer. Obesity will lead to hypertension, diabetes, all the other problems we mentioned earlier. Did you know that 30% of all cancers are associated with food? Very, very important. And 15% are related to obesity. So it's very important to be careful. Vitamins. Vitamin C and E are antioxidants. They are important for boosting the body's immunity. Does anybody know the source of vitamin C? You can put it in the chat room. Sources of vitamin C, if you know, put it in the chat room. If you know the sources of vitamin E, put it in the chat room. So for the purpose of this lecture, we want to emphasize that these are antioxidants, and antioxidants are kind of substances that mop up free radicals from the body. Thank you, Eunice. So oranges, citrus fruits are high in vitamin C. Bell peppers are also high in vitamin C, because some people don't know how to take fruits. So it's good to let them know the other sources of vitamin. Some people would take a bowl of oranges. That's not right. You're supposed to take just 2 small oranges if you want to take an orange, or 1 big one. Fruits should be limited to 2 servings per day. That's by the way. But bell pepper contains high amounts of vitamin C without the fructose and glucose that are available in orange. Vitamin C is also very high in guava. Yeah. The antioxidants prevent premature aging and fight cancer. To get enough amount of vitamin C and E, it's very important to get adequate amount of fruits and vegetables generally. So like I said, all adults should eat at least 3 servings of vegetables. 1 serving is half a cup, half of a cup. And a standard cup in nutrition parlance is 240 mils. At least 3 servings of vegetables and 2 servings of fruits. So for fruits, it's at most 2. For vegetables, it's at least 3. Vitamin D is important for maintaining calcium homeostasis and prevention of osteoporosis. Effects of vitamins on non-communicable diseases. Excess vitamin C and D are dangerous to the kidney. They can cause kidney stones and lead to kidney failure. Excess of vitamin D can also cause hypertension. So it's very important that people should limit processed foods and supplements, because those are the means of getting excess of this vitamin. If you consume them naturally, the body will handle them. Minerals. The most important out of all the minerals is sodium. Sodium helps in maintaining fluid volume outside of the cells. It makes the cells to function normally. So that means sodium is important. But did you know that if you don't take salt at all, the amount of sodium in food naturally is enough for health. It's enough to support our health. But we are all used to taking salt, so we must limit it. It should be less than 2,400 milligrams per day. And what that translates to practically is 1 level teaspoon of salt. Just think about it. 1 level teaspoon of salt throughout the day. What an average person should take throughout the day should be less than 1 level teaspoon of salt. If salt is too much, it can lead to increased blood pressure. But please let me quickly say here that we're not just concerned about the table salt you add to food when you cook. We're concerned about all the different sources of sodium, and processed foods is a major source of sodium in the body. Potassium maintains blood fluid volume inside and outside of cells. It prevents the excess rise of blood pressure. So it's like a balance for sodium. Sources of potassium include banana, plantain, potato, tomato, vegetables generally. Vegetables are rich in potassium. So we should prevent or avoid processed foods, limit salt intake, don't add too much salt to food, and at the same time add monosodium glutamate. Avoid seasonings that have high amount of monosodium glutamate. Just limit them and increase vegetable intake to balance the sodium intake with sufficient amount of potassium. Calcium is important for maintaining and building strong bones and teeth. Includes You need to include 3 servings of calcium-rich foods per day, including milk, yogurt, beans, and vegetables. Other minerals that are important include selenium and zinc. They are antioxidants and important for boosting the body's immunity. Water. Water transports nutrients throughout the body. Very important. It removes waste products from the body. We need about 3 liters per day, and men generally require to drink more water than women. So the timing is very important. Take water before a meal. Very important to take water before a meal. So the water has enough time to circulate in the body, mix with the digestive juices, and then makes digestion smooth, easy and smooth. But people that don't take enough water will suffer from dehydration, fatigue, toxicity, and kidney damage. So we see that water is also a kind of nutrient that is important. If it's not taken in adequate amount, there can be kidney damage, which is a non-communicable disease. An increased level of body acidity is a risk factor for diabetes and cancer. So it's good to take enough water and flush away acid from the body. In conclusion, or does anybody have any question before I conclude? Any question? Put it in the chat room. Have any question? Nobody? Excess carbohydrates, protein, fat, and oil can cause deposition of fat, lead to obesity, and form a risk factor for non-communicable diseases. Excess of sodium and deficiency of potassium can lead to hypertension. Obesity is a risk factor for diabetes in particular. Excess of refined sugar is not just, does not lead to obesity just because diabetes just because of obesity. It also depletes insulin. Excess of refined sugar depletes insulin and that can eventually lead to diabetes. Because there's a question in the chat room, what kind of seasoning is in that noodle? I don't want to mention the name. Generally, the seasoning that are used for noodles are high in monosodium glutamate. So that means they are high in sodium, and that means they are dangerous, very, very dangerous. So apart from the fact that noodles are refined carbohydrates, the seasoning is also very high in sodium, and they are dangerous. There's no other name for that, no other word for it. So people should avoid such. Any other person? Okay, in the absence of none, um, I'll bring this particular lecture to a close. Thank you.